Hi BookTube and welcome to a new video. I'm recording this on Tuesday the 31st of March, so it's a Tag Tuesday video, although whether it'll go out on Tuesday or not remains to be seen. This is the how do you ... which I think means how do you read tag, which I was tagged by Celia, and I shall leave a link to her video, and I think it was originated by Amy from the Dusty Bookshelf, so I shall leave a link to that. I must admit I haven't watched that one. So there's 6 prompts. The first one is, do you read more than one book at a time? If yes, what are you reading? And do you read one book at a certain time of day and another at another time of day? Well, I have to admit, before I joined BookTube, I didn't. I only ever read one book at a time. But it seems to be a combination of BookTube sort of pointing me to more books than I would have been aware of, and an excitement as a new one drops through the letterbox and sort of wanting to get to that. So I might sort of combine reading that with what I was reading before. So that's an element of it. There's also an element, I think, of at my age, at 56, I'm not saying I'm widely read, but in the areas that I like to read, I've read a lot over the years. And I kind of feel I can tell what a book's going to be like in terms of satisfying me quite early on. So if a book, now unfortunately I'm not a bailer like Sean the book mailer. I have a sort of pathological aversion to bailing, so I will always finish books. But what it might mean is I sort of run out of steam and sort of don't put it aside. I will continue reading it, but I will pick up something else, hopefully with which fills me with greater enthusiasm, and I sort of surge ahead with that. And probably when I finish that, I will go back and finish the slow poke read book. So I do read more than one book at a time. As I say, since I've joined BookTube, another thing I've started doing is I've started having bath time reads, mainly because books that I use bookmarks in, and I know bookmarks is one of the prompts further down, books I use bookmarks in, I don't read in the bath because the bookmark will inevitably fall in the water and get soggy and unusable. And even if I leave it out, the hot steam of the bath makes it soggy. So I tend to read books which have nice sort of bite-sized chapters, so I can end in a definitive place and remember and then insert a bookmark later. Or that I tend now to read quite a lot more non-fiction in the bath than I used to. I mean, I don't read a huge amount of non-fiction, but I do try and sort of keep non-fiction for the bath for some reason. I guess because you're less wrapped up in the sort of narrative flow, even though the non-fiction book may be making an argument through its narrative. But anyway, so a slightly sort of involved answer to that question. Question 2, how do you organise your library? Okay, well, we're going to have to go mobile for this, and I hope you don't get travel sickness. So I have a multifaceted library in at least 4 different places within the demesne that I occupy. And for the first one of those, we are going to go really mobile, so bear with me. Okay, so long-time subscribers may recognise what's in front of them, but they won't recognise this white path, because since I last filmed my shed, we've had a new path laid. So this is the shed where I used to store all my books, except the ones I was currently reading or about to read. But, again, long-time subscribers to my channel, and I can post the links to these if you're really interested. Last year I had an outbreak of what I thought was mould and mildew, but actually it was a leaky roof, and we had to have the whole roof replastered. And I had to throw out 2 bookshelves which were there, lining that wall there, and about 300 books, which was heartbreaking. And I've also got a couple of videos on what decisions I took in terms of restocking, because I couldn't afford to restock all 300. So I had to pick and choose. So in terms of reorganising my library, which is the next question, I'm going to jump around between the 2 of them, I'm afraid. I'm going to buy at least 1, if not 2 bookshelves to replace the 2 that were lost from there. Now, although I don't have many books particularly, to file in those new ones. I've got quite a lot upstairs to bring down and put in here. And I have to say, now that I've got this sort of class system or CAL system of books, which you will see, the ones in here are the ones I'm less taken by or will less need to refer to or reread or anything like that. So this is a bit of a sort of purdah of my library section. It never used to be, as I say, because all my books are in here. But sort of after the crisis, needs must and all that, I bought some new bookshelves to, which we will see in a minute, to house my favourite books in the nice, safe warmth of my house. Okay, so this is part one. As I say, my summer aim is to get 2 new bookshelves, or at least 1 new bookshelf, and fill out that room. So back into the house, my lounge is there. There is a couple of built-in bookshelves which have a few. But we're not going to the lounge because my wife is working from home under the self-isolation. Okay. Oh, I've come in the wrong room. So if we count the lounge as part 2, and I've got books by sort of Clarice Lispector and Burroughs, so the older writers. This is my bedside drawer, which has my sort of upcoming books, although at the moment it's mainly populated by the Read More German Lit 2020. I've read 5 already. This is what I've got for the rest of the year. Dark Satellites by Clemens Meyer. I've read 1 Clemens Meyer book before. This is my second. This is short stories, as you can see on the Fitzcarraldo label. Austerlitz by W.J. Seybold. All the Rings of Saturn, which I think, to be honest, is going to be more likely the one of his I read this year. We also have The Portable Hannah Arendt, who's someone I refer to quite a lot in something I'm writing. We have Bertolt Brecht's The Threepenny novel. Also a book of short stories of Brecht, which I've had for years and never read. I've read a lot of his plays or seen them, but I've not read any of his prose. Thomas Bernhardt, correction. I read last year his book Concrete. Was a bit bemused by it, so this is going to be my second sort of giving of a chance to Bernhard, see if I get on with him or not. And that's it. So those are my sort of German lit books. As you can see, there's some Beckett in there. Right, so that's part 3. And into the real hub, into the heartland. So these are the 2 new bookshelves I bought last year to replace the ones in the shed, and these have my sort of prize books really. And how are they organised? Well, you can call it organised. So shelf 1 and 2 are women's fiction. So we will trawl along slowly, give you a chance to see some of the titles. And as you can see already, I'm having to stack because I've run out of room. That's the top shelf. Scarlett Thomas, one of my favourite writers. Ali Smith, 3 of the trilogy. Wait for the the quaternary or whatever it's called. Wait for the 4th. Miriam Tees, 2 Anna Burns books, both the Jenny Ophil's books, Jennifer Egan, and my favourite book last year, Lost Children Archive, etc. Okay, and then down here we have my European writers section. There are some women here, I think, so they could easily go on the women's shelf, but like I say, it's not a perfect system. So lots of, let's start from that side, lots of Houellebecq, in fact everything by Houellebecq I think. Nathalie Sarraute, who obviously could go on the women's shelf, Sarah Margot, Perec and Seybold. Also got 2 more Seybold books to go there once I've read them. A couple of Norwegian books. Closely Observed Trains, which I read last year. That Thomas Bernhard, which I read last year. Irish is European, why not? Danny Denton, which got my top 10 of the year in 2018. Edward Louis, Sibo down below, Laurent Binet. It's time for a new Laurent Binet book, I feel. Matthew Zenard, who's one of my favourite writers. A couple of the German books I've read this year. Ingeborg Bachmann, Melina, although she's Austrian. Agnes by Peter Stamm. And The Train Was on Time by Heinrich Boll. So that's 3. And Anne Seger. So in fact, that's 4. And Max Frisch. In fact, all 5 of the German books I've read this year are on that shelf. This shelf is my British authors. The ones slightly on the more experimental side, maybe, although not all of them. So we have David Peace, who is definitely sort of experimental. Then we have Michel Faber, who probably isn't, but then we have Tom McCarthy, who is. So not great consistency. Tibor Fischer, who is, but I've rather gone off. Neil Bartlett, who's one of my all-time favourite male authors. Oh, I seem to have got Neil Bartlett and Tibor Fischer mixed up. I think I did that because of size. And then up here we have books like Kevin Davey Playing Possum and The Cemetery and Barns by Gabriele Josipovici. They are definitely what you would call experimental, but the 2 David Park books above are not experimental. So like I say, and I don't know why that is there, that has been misplaced because that is Canadian. A Primer for Cadavers by Ed Atkins. My God, that's an intense read. And on the bottom shelf we have The Rest of the World. So we have Han Kang, Madeleine Tien, a Peruvian book which is very good, Mongolian Conspiracy, which is actually written by a Mexican author in the 60s. All of Yuri Herrera's, although I have no desire to read his new one that's just come out. Didn't sound that interesting. 2 David Grossman books, which are lucky to be there because I haven't enjoyed either of them. So I will have this system that when I get something that needs to go in that shelf and there's no more room, those Grossman ones will be banished to the shed. My Murakami and Martel collection. So that's that bookcase. Here we have my non-fiction sort of reference section. Art, psychology, semiotics, sound, war stuff. And as you can see, it's sort of already teeming. And here are my son's books on this shelf. Now, when he leaves home, whenever that will be, he's 22 at the moment, I will happily transfer this non-fiction onto this shelf, reclaim it from his books. Then I will at least have one more shelf for my fiction books. Here are my little finger puppets, Vonnegut, Joyce, Foucault, and falling over Bertolt Brecht. And Joyce has just fallen down and taken Foucault with him. Anyway, this is another British author's shelf. David Mitchell, John Lanchester, Rupert Thompson, and then the more recent writers like Max Porter, Will Eaves, Will Wiles, Sam Byers, Lee Rourke. So they all have books out. These are all books published in the last 2 years. And down here we have my US experimental, I suppose. Ben Marcus, my favourite writer. Blake Butler. Jonathan Lethem, who perhaps isn't that experimental. Joshua Cohen, Daniel Iluski's House of Leaves. Sergio de la Pava. Denise Smith's poetry is rather wonderful. Gary Lutz, who's a short story writer. And then we have Gaddis, Gass and Markson. And Ronald Sukanek. And then down here we have Jared Kobeck. These are all Americans. Jeffrey Eugenides, Dave Eggers, and Don DeLillo, my entire Don DeLillo collection, except Libra, which I'll show you in a minute. And finally down here we have slightly more conventional American authors, so Kent Haroof, Anthony Mara, George Saunders, Paul Beattie, Ben Lerner, David Vann, Percival Everett. Yeah, there was a lot of fuss this year because is it Influx Press or Galley Beggars? I think it was Influx publishing an old Percival Everett book as if it's a new book, because basically I don't think many people in the UK have heard of Percival Everett, who's probably a postmodern author. He could very easily go on my experimental shelf. And, you know, they keep pounding out, you know, this is a fantastic exclusive. No, it isn't. I mean, I assume that the book that they're, I think it's called Don't Call Me Sidney Poitier, I think that's the name of it. I can only assume it's gone out of print and they've got the rights to reprint it, but, you know, big whoop, I say. And then finally, the informal section. This is my to-be-read pile. As you can see, at the top is American Dirt, which I'm less and less inclined to read, to be honest, as I hear more and more about it. So we've got Celine, Moby Dick, and Will Eves, a book I haven't read, Middle Sea by William Gass, Don DeLillo Libro, which is the only DeLillo book I have left to read other than Retina's Star, so that will hopefully be read this year. Eggers, except this is some non-fiction here at the top, although Octavia Butler is there because she is a proposed buddy read with Elizabeth at Bookish North. Georges Perec is a proposed buddy read with Celia, who tagged me for this. An Important Artifacts and by Leanne Shapton is a proposed buddy read with Sina. And then these books here are the ones I was mentioning. I've read these. They're all pretty awful, and that's why they're going to go to the shed, but there's no point doing it till I've got that bookshelf in place. So Nell Zink, Doxology, Martin McInnes, Infinite Ground, which wasn't awful, but I didn't like it. A Meal in Winter by Hubert Mingarelli, which was awful. Diary of a Murderer by Kim Young-ha, which is etc, etc. Oh yes, Yara Rodriguez Fowler, The Stubborn Archivist, which was one of my worst books that I read last year. Citizen and American Lyric is a good book. The only reason it says because I can't imagine that I would be referring to it again. Hurricane Season, which is probably going to be one of my worst books of this year, even though it's long listed for the Man Booker International. Peter Handke, who has been banished for political reasons. Body Tourist by Jane Rogers, which is fairly awful. So there you go. That is my reading system. Right, hopefully you haven't got dizzy. On to the next question. So, do you ever get the urge to reorganise your library in a different way? Well, I don't, other than, as I said, I'm going to get a new bookshelf in the outhouse, in the shed, and populate that. But it's not really reorganising. 4. Who's your favourite small or finer press publisher? Anyone who'll publish me, basically. I do like Galley Beggars Press. I did like Fitzcarraldo, but I think they've got a lot more hit and miss than they used to be. And I can't remember other sort of minor presses because I don't really look at presses, really, who publishes what. I probably should do because, you know, I'd probably be writing to them, trying to, to submit my work. But anyway, it's just not something I really look for. Other than Fitzcarraldo, but as I say, I've become increasingly less able to trust their output. 5. Can you recall every book you have in your library, or are there books you find on your shelves that seem to have just showed up? Well, the answer to that is, look, I couldn't swear to listing all 800 or 1,000 books, whatever it is I have, but I don't find books that I've forgotten I have. I find books that have gone missing, like everyone, because you've lent them to somebody. And I do this very strange thing where I sort of periodically, before I go to bed, or as I've just got into bed, and I will recall all the books that I've read this year. So, for example, I've read 30 books this year, and 2 nights ago I listed them off. So I really tend not to forget them. And earlier this month, I listed off, or tried to list off of the 130 that I read last year, and I think I got to about 120 that I'd recalled. And the previous year was 107 books I read, and I think I've got about 80 or 90. So I don't recall every single book, but I do recall most of them. And finally, 6. Do you collect bookmarks? Well, I don't collect them in the sense of collecting them, but I do want to hoard them because I find them invaluable to my reading. It's the only way I can remember where I've got to in a book. And the problem is I keep losing them. So that's the reason I keep wanting to gather new ones. So I'm not collecting them for their aesthetic value or to show off in a collection. I'm collecting them because I don't have enough, partly due, as I say, because I lose them. So, for example, books I'm currently reading, but I put aside, so there's a bookmark committed to that. The James Joyce Readathon, which is currently on hold. It's not really a bookmark, it's an Amazon, I don't know, some sort of thing that came in an Amazon box there. And the footnotes, which you also have to bookmark when you're doing Joyce and annotated. I've got a Continental Airlines ticket. I don't know how I've come by this because I don't fly, but anyway. So the point is that I have lots of bookmarks eaten up in lots of books and probably forgotten where they are. So I just always need bookmarks. So there you have it. Thanks very much to Celia for tagging me. I hope that was of some interest. Until next time, thanks very much.